On a cold, rainy night, she stood outside his house, not to confess Vesla.
This was the same man she once loved in silence, the same smile that promised. One lie changed everything, a secret so deep that it turned first love into something dangerous. As thunder echoed,
but what he did next would shatter both their lives forever. Stay till the end.
The rain was falling softly that evening when she first saw him. Not the kind of rain that drenches and ruins your clothes, but the kind that feels like it's washing the world clean, making everything sharper, more real. She remembered the first time their paths crossed, on a quiet street near the old coffee shop where she used to spend her evenings alone, scribbling thoughts into her notebook. He was there with a friend, laughing easily, the kind of laugh that made strangers smile even if they didn't know why. She didn't speak at first. She simply watched, hidden under the shadow of a tree, her umbrella barely doing its job against the misty drizzle. Something about him made her heart skip. It wasn't immediate love, not the kind you see in movies, but a gentle pull, like gravity. She had seen many people in her life, but he felt different. There was a warmth behind his eyes, a sense of someone who understood the quiet spaces between people. Over the next few weeks, she found herself at the same coffee shop more often, always hoping to see him. And every time she did, she pretended it was accidental. She would catch glimpses of him from across the room, noticing the way he tucked his hair behind his ear when he laughed, or how his eyes seemed to linger on things that mattered, not just people. Eventually, fate, or maybe just coincidence, made her step into his world. One rainy evening, her notebook fell from her hands as she rushed to avoid the sudden downpour. He caught it before it hit the wet sidewalk. Their hands touched, briefly, but enough for a spark to travel straight to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the rain hitting the windows. He smiled. "You're welcome. Are you okay?" Something in that moment felt different, like the world had paused just for them. They started talking. Simple things at first, favorite books, music, the weather, but gradually conversations stretched late into the night through text messages and calls. The more she learned about him, the more she wanted to be part of his life. It was effortless. It felt real. She trusted him with pieces of herself she hadn't shared with anyone in years. And soon, the quiet affection between them bloomed into something deeper. She thought it was love, innocent, tender, and filled with hope. Then came the first crack. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. Just a delay in his messages, a tone that felt different over the phone, a sudden disappearance when she needed him. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that he was busy, that life happened. But the feeling wouldn't leave her. Something was off. One evening, she decided to surprise him. She bought his favorite snacks, wrapped them in a small box, and headed to the place he said he would be. But when she arrived, she saw him with someone else. Laughing, touching her shoulder, leaning closer than she had ever leaned to her. Her heart froze. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Maybe they were friends. But as she watched, the truth became undeniable. The man she loved, the one who had held her trust, had hidden another life from her. Her mind raced, refusing to believe the evidence her eyes clearly saw. She ran into the night without saying a word. The rain soaked her clothes, her hair plastered to her face, but she didn't feel it. All she felt was betrayal. The kind that burns you from the inside, that leaves your chest aching long after the moment passes. For days, she couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. Every memory of him, every smile, every gentle word, twisted into a knife inside her chest. And yet, beneath the pain, a quiet fire began to burn. Revenge. Not reckless or violent, but a desire to make him feel the weight of what he had done. To turn the tables. She started watching him. From a distance, carefully, never revealing that she knew. She observed his routines, his friends, his small habits. It wasn't obsession, at least, she told herself it wasn't, but preparation. She wanted him to understand, fully, what it meant to break someone who had loved him completely. Her friends noticed a change. She seemed quieter, more thoughtful, almost dangerous in a way. They didn't know the storm brewing inside her. They didn't know how the pain of lost love was transforming into something more calculated, more deliberate. That stormy night, the kind where rain beats against the windows and the city feels deserted, she finally made her plan. It wasn't about hurting him physically. It wasn't about public humiliation. It was about making him face the truth, alone, the same way she had faced his betrayal. She would confront him, not in anger, not in shouting, but in a way that left no room for lies, no space for excuses. She would take the love he had once taken for granted and turn it into the weapon that made him realize exactly what he had lost. And as she sat by her window, listening to the rain, she whispered to herself, Tonight he will see me for who I really am. And he will regret everything he thought he could get away with. Little did she know, that night would not only change his life, it would change hers forever too. The line between love and revenge, between heartbreak and justice, was about to blur in ways she could never have imagined. The rain didn't stop that night. It fell hard, relentless, as if the sky itself knew what was about to unfold. She pulled her coat tighter around her, her umbrella barely protecting her from the downpour. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from anticipation. Every step she took toward his apartment felt heavier, charged with memories and unspoken words that had been building for weeks. She remembered the night he had first held her hand, the way his eyes had softened as he looked at her, promising things with a glance instead of words. She remembered every laugh, every quiet moment shared in dimly lit coffee shops or on long walks through empty streets. And now, those memories were tainted. Each one a reminder that the man she loved could betray without guilt. As she reached the entrance of his building, she paused for a moment. Her reflection in the wet glass door showed a woman transformed. Gone was the naive girl who had fallen blindly in love. In her place stood someone strong, determined, ready to confront the man who had shattered her world. She took a deep breath, pushed open the door, and stepped into the warmth of the lobby. He was waiting. Not for her, of course, he didn't know she was coming. He was pacing, looking at his phone, a small frown creasing his forehead. She froze for a moment, watching him, and the sight of him laughing at some message earlier in the week came back to her, cutting through her chest like glass. Then she moved forward, her steps silent but deliberate. She didn't announce herself.
She didn't need to.
He looked up, and the moment his eyes landed on hers, something in his expression shifted.
Surprise.
Confusion. And then, as recognition settled in, fear, or maybe guilt, crept in. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice low, almost shaky. "You know why," she said simply, her voice calm but cold. She dropped the umbrella and let it roll to the side, letting the rainwater drip off her coat. "You've been hiding for weeks, pretending nothing happened."
But I saw everything.
His eyes widened.
I
can explain." She held up a hand, stopping him before he could speak another word.
No.
Tonight isn't about excuses. Tonight is about truth. She stepped closer, letting the rainwater soak her boots, letting the cold seep into her skin, because she wanted him to feel the weight of reality, the discomfort, the tension, the inevitability of facing consequences. "You think I didn't notice? The lies, the secrets, the way you smiled at her like I didn't exist?" Her voice trembled slightly, but only from the intensity of the moment, not weakness. "Do you have any idea how that feels? To love someone completely and find out they've been living a double life?" He looked away, guilt etched into every line of his face. I didn't mean, you didn't mean," she interrupted, her eyes flashing. "Do you know how long I trusted you? How I let you into the corners of my mind I never shared with anyone? You broke that trust.
You broke me."
The silence that followed was deafening. The rain fell harder, drumming on the windows, echoing in the empty apartment. He opened his mouth, closed it, and finally whispered, I didn't know how to tell you." Her chest tightened. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the confession, the truth. But it wasn't enough. Words alone could never undo the damage. She needed him to feel the consequences, the emptiness, the sting of betrayal mirrored back at him. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. It wasn't just any notebook. It was the one she had scribbled in during those lonely nights, the one that held every thought, every memory, every hurt she had felt while watching him with someone else. She opened it, letting him see the pages filled with her words. Read it. Every word is what I felt when you lied, when you smiled at her, when you pretended I didn't exist. He took it reluctantly, flipping through pages that made his eyes widen in disbelief. There were no curses, no anger-filled rants. Only truth. Only raw, painful honesty. And as he read, the color drained from his face.
He couldn't speak.
He couldn't hide behind excuses anymore. I didn't realize, he whispered finally, his voice breaking. She stepped back, letting him feel the distance she had created. Emotionally, as much as physically. You didn't realize? She asked softly, but the words were sharp, cutting through the tension. Do you know what it feels like to be invisible to someone you loved? To be replaced by someone else while thinking you were the only one in their heart? He shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. No, I didn't know. I swear I didn't mean, she held up a finger. Stop. Stop justifying yourself. Tonight isn't about your guilt. It's about what you did, and what you're about to feel. And then, she did something he didn't expect.
She didn't yell. She didn't storm out.
She smiled, soft, cold, a smile that carried both pain and power. I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to make sure you understand. To make sure you never forget what you did. The rain tapped harder against the windows, as if urging her on. And then she left. Not running, not crying, just walking out into the storm, letting him sit in the silence, the truth, the weight of what he had lost. He called after her, stumbling toward the door, but she didn't stop. She let him stand there, alone, surrounded by the echoes of betrayal and the sound of rain. That night, he felt the emptiness he had caused her. He felt the consequences of his actions, the finality of trust broken beyond repair. And somewhere deep inside, he realized that some mistakes don't just vanish. Some betrayals leave permanent scars, not just on the heart, but on the soul. As she disappeared into the dark, rainy night, she felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Revenge wasn't about destruction, it was about clarity, about ensuring that the truth was felt deeply, painfully, undeniably.
And tonight, she had accomplished that.
But little did she know, this confrontation was only the beginning. The night wasn't done yet. The secrets he had hidden, the choices he had made, they were about to unravel in ways neither of them could have imagined. And when the storm passed, nothing would be the same again. The morning after that rainy night, the city seemed quieter than usual. But inside him, everything was chaotic. He sat in his apartment, the notebook she had left behind open on the table. Every word, every sentence, every line was etched into his mind, replaying like a slow, cruel movie. For the first time, he understood, not just with his mind but with his chest, his stomach, his entire being, what it meant to lose someone who had loved him completely. He had tried to justify himself, tried to tell himself that it wasn't that serious, that she would eventually forgive him. But reading her words, seeing the honesty and pain captured in ink, he felt the weight of every lie he had told, every smile he had faked, every stolen moment that was never meant for her eyes. The notebook was more than paper. It was a mirror reflecting his failures, his betrayal, his cruelty. Meanwhile, she was walking through the city streets, umbrella long forgotten, the rain soaking through her coat. But she didn't feel cold. She felt free. Strange as it seemed, her heart had begun to settle into a rhythm of understanding. Revenge wasn't about punishing him for her own satisfaction. It was about clarity, about facing the pain and letting it be seen. She had been hurt deeply, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like the storm inside her was finally breaking. As she walked, she thought about their first meeting, their quiet evenings, their shared laughter. And yes, she still loved him, in a way that made her chest ache. But love had changed. It wasn't innocent anymore. It was sharp, aware, and powerful. It could hurt, but it could also protect her. And that realization, that kind of love, was a strange comfort. Back in his apartment, he was making calls, messy, frantic, apologetic, but it wasn't enough. The people around him noticed a shift too. Friends who had once thought him carefree and careless now saw him quiet, tense, like a man who had finally realized the gravity of his mistakes. They tried to offer comfort, but he didn't want comfort. He wanted her back. He wanted to undo everything. But the truth is, you can't erase what has already happened. You can only try to make amends, and sometimes even that isn't enough. That evening, he received a message from her. It was simple, almost cryptic. Meet me at the old bridge midnight. Alone. His heart skipped a beat. Fear, hope, guilt, all of it collided inside him. He knew it wasn't going to be easy. He didn't know what she had planned, but he knew it would be meaningful. Life had a way of balancing itself, and somehow he felt that tonight the scales were tipping. As he arrived at the bridge, the night was silent except for the distant hum of the city and the occasional drip of water from the rain-soaked trees. She was there, leaning against the railing, her face partially hidden under the hood of her coat. He took a deep breath, approaching carefully, unsure of what awaited him. "You came," she said, her voice calm, measured, but carrying an undercurrent of power. I had to, he replied, his voice low, almost trembling. "I don't know what I did to deserve this, but I need to." "Stop," she interrupted, raising a hand. "Tonight isn't about excuses. Tonight is about understanding. Understanding what it feels like to be left behind, unseen, betrayed." He nodded, swallowing hard. The weight of her words pressed down on him, heavier than any rainstorm. She gestured to the water below, where the river flowed quietly, reflecting the dim streetlights like a trail of silver. "Do you remember the night we first met here? Or do you only remember the lies and excuses?" She asked softly, but the words cut sharp. He looked down, ashamed. "I remember. I remember everything. I remember you more than anyone else." She studied him, her eyes like mirrors reflecting all the hurt, the betrayal, and the love still lingering beneath the surface. Love isn't just about feeling. It's about respecting, protecting, being honest even when it's hard. You failed in all of that. He flinched at her words, the truth settling like a stone in his chest. And then, she began to tell him stories, small moments he had forgotten or dismissed, moments that had meant everything to her. Every word she spoke was a reminder of what he had lost. Every memory she shared was a blade that cut through the layers of denial he had built around himself. And then came the turning point. "I didn't come here just to remind you of what you lost," she said, her voice softer now, almost sad. "I came here because I need you to understand that love is never simple. It's never just happiness. It's responsibility. And you broke that responsibility." He fell silent. Tears ran down his cheeks, unbidden, unstoppable. For the first time, he was truly humbled. He wasn't the confident, carefree man anymore. He was a man who had been confronted with the consequences of his choices. And for the first time, he realized something crucial. She wasn't seeking revenge in the way he feared. Her revenge was truth. And karma, he realized, wasn't something he could avoid. It wasn't punishment from someone else. It was the natural consequence of his actions, the way life had balanced itself. Every lie, every betrayal, every stolen moment of her trust had come back to him, not as punishment, but as clarity. He could see it, feel it, and it hurt more than any scolding, any insult, any physical consequence ever could. She looked at him, the bridge between them tense with emotion. I still care," she admitted quietly. "But care isn't enough anymore. Understanding isn't enough. You need to feel this. You need to know the weight of what you've done." He nodded, broken, finally understanding the gravity of his betrayal. He didn't speak, because words wouldn't undo anything. And in that silence, something shifted. Not reconciliation, Not yet, but awareness.
Respect.
And, strangely, love that had survived the storm, tempered now by pain and truth. The rain continued to fall around them, soaking their coats, their hair, their skin. But it didn't matter. They were no longer hiding from emotions, from truths, from consequences. That night, under the dark sky, karma had begun its work, not as vengeance, but as the undeniable reckoning of love betrayed. And somewhere deep inside, she felt the tiniest flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, love could survive the storm. But it would never be the same. Not for them. Not after betrayal. Not after truth. The night air was thick with tension as she walked along the deserted street after leaving the bridge. The rain had eased, leaving a damp chill that clung to her skin. Every step she took echoed in the quiet night, and yet her mind was louder than any sound, a whirlwind of memories, regrets, and unanswered questions. She could still feel him on the bridge, the way his eyes had pleaded silently, the way he had trembled as if the full weight of his betrayal had finally caught up to him. She thought about the first time she had trusted him completely. That gentle smile, the way he had reached for her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. She remembered the warmth of his laughter, the comfort of his voice on lonely nights. And yet, she remembered the other moments too. The lies, the excuses, the nights when she waited for him and he was somewhere else, with someone else. Each memory was a blade, cutting deeper than the last. Meanwhile, he was pacing his apartment, soaked from the rain, his heart hammering in his chest. The notebook she had left behind still lay open on the table, the pages curling at the edges from the moisture. He had read it again and again, each line a merciless reminder of the love he had destroyed. He knew he deserved the pain, the regret, the emptiness that gnawed at him. But that didn't make it easier. He couldn't stop thinking about her, the way she had confronted him with calm fury, the way she had made him face every lie he had told. He felt small, exposed, utterly vulnerable in a way he had never experienced before. For the first time in his life, he understood that love wasn't just a feeling, it was a responsibility, a promise, a weight that could crush if mishandled. And he had mishandled everything. She had reached a small park, her boots leaving damp imprints on the wet path. She paused beneath a lone streetlight, watching the mist curl around the edges of the lamp like smoke. The quiet was almost unbearable. She had expected him to chase her, to beg for forgiveness, to say the words that might have eased her pain. But he hadn't. He had respected her distance, if only out of shock or guilt. And that was enough for now. But the story wasn't over. As if drawn by some invisible force, he found himself at the same park, hesitating just beyond the light's glow. The moment he saw her, standing there with her coat soaked and hair plastered to her face, something inside him snapped. He ran, unthinking, toward her, his words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I'm sorry," he shouted, voice breaking. I can't let it end like this." She didn't move at first. Her eyes were wide, guarded, but also soft. A flicker of the old warmth she had once felt for him, the tenderness that had drawn her to him in the first place. But it was brief. She had learned that tenderness could coexist with strength, and she would not let her heart be crushed again. "You don't understand," she said, her voice steady but low. "This isn't about forgiveness yet. This is about truth. You need to feel what it's like to hurt someone the way you hurt me." He stumbled closer, desperation in every movement. "I do. I feel it every day. Every single day. I can't sleep, I can't eat. I keep seeing your face, hearing your voice. I know I ruined everything, but please, please, let me make it right." Her eyes softened slightly, but only slightly. "Do you know what it's like to live with that kind of betrayal? To think someone you loved would never truly see you? You didn't just break my heart. You broke my trust in people. You made me doubt everything I felt. Do you understand that?" He nodded, tears streaming freely now. "I understand. I understand more than you'll ever know. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix us if you'll let me." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The rain had stopped completely, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle night breeze. She studied his face, the sincerity in his eyes, the raw emotion that had no pretense. It was the same man she had loved, but changed, humbled, and aware of the consequences of his actions. And yet, the love she felt for him was no longer naive. It was layered, complex, and cautious. She wanted to reach for him, to close the distance between them, but she also knew that trust, once broken, wasn't restored in a single moment. "You hurt me deeply," she whispered finally, voice trembling. "And I still care about you. But that doesn't mean I'm ready to forgive." "Not yet." He fell silent, understanding. Not because she had forgiven him, but because she had acknowledged her own feelings and his reality. That recognition, that honesty, was more powerful than any apology he could give. They stood there, under the faint glow of the streetlight, two hearts battered by love and betrayal, yet strangely aligned by truth. The storm had passed, but its echoes remained in the weight of what had happened and the fragile hope of what might come. She finally stepped closer, just enough to brush her hand against his, a tentative contact that was both a question and a promise. "I don't know if we can go back to what we were," she said softly. "But I know that love, real love, deserves a chance to heal. If you're willing to wait, and if you're willing to truly change." He grasped her hand gently, reverently, as if holding something precious and fragile. "I'll wait," he said, voice firm now, full of determination. "I'll change. I'll do whatever it takes. I can't promise the past, but I promise my future. With you, if you'll have me." For the first time that night, a small sense of relief washed over her. She wasn't fully healed, and he wasn't fully forgiven, but they had reached a turning point. The storm of betrayal, revenge, and pain had forced them both to confront themselves. And in that confrontation, something shifted, something neither of them could ignore. They didn't speak for a long while. Words weren't necessary. The silence, the shared understanding, and the lingering warmth of tentative hope said more than any apology could. The night had been long, filled with pain, reckoning, and revelation. And though the path ahead was uncertain, both of them knew that love, tested by betrayal and tempered by truth, could survive, but only if handled with care. As they walked side by side toward the dimly lit street, their hands still barely touching, she realized something important. Revenge had not destroyed him, nor had it destroyed her. It had exposed the truth, forced reckoning, and allowed for a glimmer of something deeper to take root, cautious, aware, and ready to grow if nurtured with honesty. And in the quiet of the night, under the lingering mist of the storm, two hearts began to cautiously, painfully, and carefully rebuild what had once been broken. The days after the rainy night passed in a quiet, reflective haze. She woke up each morning carrying the weight of the confrontation, the notebook, the bridge, and the truth that had finally been spoken. And yet, for the first time in weeks, she felt a strange kind of peace. The storm inside her heart had settled enough to let her breathe, to think clearly, and to feel without fear. He, on the other hand, was living in a state of constant self-reflection. Every choice he had made, every betrayal, every small lie replayed in his mind like a relentless film. But unlike before, these memories weren't just guilt. They were lessons. They were reminders that love is not just an emotion, it's a responsibility, a living thing that needs care, attention, and honesty. And he was determined, more than ever, not to repeat his mistakes. They began to see each other again, slowly. Not in the reckless way of old, but cautiously, deliberately. Each meeting, each conversation, was measured, honest, and filled with the awareness of the past. They walked in quiet parks, sat on familiar benches, and shared coffee in dimly lit cafes. The physical gestures, the hand touching, the tentative hugs, the soft glances, were infused with meaning now. Each touch was a promise, not just of affection, but of care, understanding, and change. She noticed the changes in him first. Small things at first. He didn't take her for granted. He listened more than he spoke. He admitted mistakes openly. He no longer assumed she would forgive automatically. He was present, fully, in a way he had never been before. And slowly, her walls began to lower, brick by brick. The anger, the betrayal, the pain. They still existed, but they were tempered by honesty and effort. There were nights when she still cried quietly, alone in her room, remembering the depth of the hurt. But these tears were different. They weren't fueled by betrayal, but by reflection, understanding, and even forgiveness in the making. She realized that forgiveness wasn't about letting him off the hook. It wasn't about pretending nothing happened. It was about freeing herself from the poison of resentment, about reclaiming her own peace. He, too, faced his own internal battles. The shame of what he had done, the fear that she would never trust him again, and the constant need to prove himself weighed heavily on him. But he embraced it. He knew there was no shortcut to rebuilding trust. Every kind word, every gesture of honesty, every small act of consideration was a step toward redemption. And he committed himself fully. One quiet evening, they met at the bridge again, the same bridge where everything had changed. The night was calm, the city lights reflecting on the wet pavement from a brief shower earlier. They walked slowly, side by side, sharing silence at first. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that comes after storms, when the air is cleaner, the sky clearer, and hearts cautiously aligned. She stopped and looked at him, her eyes searching his. "I won't lie," she said softly. "There are still scars. There always will be. But I see you trying. I see you being present. And that matters." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I can't change the past. I can't undo the pain. But I can promise to never betray you again. Not your heart. Not your trust. Not the love you give so freely." Her lips curled into a small, tentative smile. "And I can promise to keep being honest. Even when it's hard. Even when it scares me. Because love without honesty isn't love at all." They stood there for a long while, hand in hand, looking at the water flowing beneath the bridge. The river didn't stop moving, and neither would life, but for the first time in a long time, they felt ready to move forward, together, cautiously, but with hope. Over the following weeks, they rebuilt their connection carefully. They didn't rush. They didn't pretend that the past didn't exist. But they celebrated the little victories, a smile shared without fear, a conversation that ended in understanding rather than tension, a night when they laughed together without recalling the pain. Friends noticed the change. The woman who had once been quiet and withdrawn now carried herself with quiet strength, dignity, and a softness that only comes from surviving emotional storms. The man who had once been careless and indifferent now moved with awareness, sensitivity, and a commitment to presence. Together, they were not the same as before. They were stronger, wiser, and more aware of the fragile, precious nature of love. There were moments of tension, of doubt, of lingering hurt, but they faced them together. They communicated openly, never hiding fears or insecurities. They learned that love was not just passion or chemistry, it was patience, honesty, forgiveness and progress, and a willingness to confront one's own flaws. Months later, they returned to the bridge, not for confrontation, but for remembrance. The rain fell lightly this time, a gentle drizzle that felt cleansing rather than punishing. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "We survived the storm," he whispered. "We did," she replied, her voice soft but full of strength. "And we'll survive whatever comes next. Together." It wasn't a perfect love. There were still scars, memories of betrayal, and moments of fear. But it was real, honest, and resilient. They had faced darkness, confronted pain, and allowed karma and truth to guide their path. And through it all, they discovered something rare. That love, when tested, could transform rather than destroy. And so, the story ended not with vengeance or heartbreak, but with growth, understanding, and the cautious, beautiful beginning of a love that had learned the true meaning of trust. A love that had been tested by betrayal and survived, tempered by honesty, and strengthened by the very trials that once threatened to destroy it. The rain stopped completely that night. The air was crisp, the sky clearing, and the first faint stars appeared. Standing there, hand in hand, they looked at the world anew. Not as naive lovers, but as people who had learned the hard truths of the heart and chosen to face the future together. And in that quiet, starlit moment, they both realized the storm had passed, but its lessons would remain forever, shaping the love that had survived it, stronger and wiser than before.